Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody joining the webinar on the role of social protection and social development in the run-up to the World Social Summit. My name is Katja Huyo and I'm moderating the session today. I'm working with UNRISD, the United Nations Research Institute for Social Development. I think we give it a little bit more time for people to join. And I just let you take a brief look at the agenda of the day. So as you see, we will have an introduction, an expert discussion, a free discussion, and a closing. But let's wait 1 or 2 more minutes so people can join. Thank you. So I think we can give it a start. So let me say hello again to everyone joining us today from around the world. It's a pleasure to chair this webinar today on the discussion on the role of social protection and social development in the run-up to the World Social Summit. Again, my name is Katja Huyo from UNRISD. It's my pleasure to moderate this meeting. This is a meeting where we would like to have a very open discussion and give information, but also seek your views and opinions on the ongoing process that is leading us to the second World Summit for Social Development that will happen in Doha, Qatar in November this year. And we are very pleased to partner today with the socialprotection.org knowledge platform hosting this webinar on behalf of USP 2030. And just a couple of words on this global partnership. So USP 2030 stands for Universal Social Protection 2030 Global Partnership and comprises quite a number of development actors, member states, UN agencies, NGOs, and other members who promote universal social protection worldwide and as a goal to reach by 2030. And the partnership is also very involved in the preparations of the second World Social Summit that will happen, as I said, in November, and which is a milestone in the discussions and also the political commitment to social protection and to social development after 30 years when the first World Social Summit was convened in Copenhagen in 1995. So what has USP 2030 already done in terms of the social summit? But let me first say a couple of session essential, so you know how you can engage today. Sorry, I jumped a little bit too quickly into the substance. So first of all, please rename yourself and indicate your name, and if you wish, your organization. Use the chat box, as Fernanda has already indicated, to present yourself, to tell us how you feel today, and what you're interested in the discussion today. If you would like to get support in terms of automatic captions, you can switch on this tool at the bottom in the Zoom screen. You find the automatic captions button. Feel also free to switch on your camera so we can all see each other and engage better. And as said, when we start the discussion, I would like you to raise your hand so we can give you the floor. Also, finally, the session is recorded as all sp.org webinars, so people who are not able to join us now can access the recording and get all the information and the discussions we are having today. So let us start also with a quick, temperature feel of everyone who is joining today. We would like to run a poll with a question on how familiar are you with the draft Second World Summit for Social Development political declaration. And please answer the poll that will appear on your screen and take a minute for that. So as you can see now, the questions have popped up. So how familiar are you with the political declaration that is negotiated at the moment? One option, I have read the latest version of the political declaration that is negotiated by member states and was published on the 15th of July. I have read one of the earlier versions. I have not read any draft. And finally, I was not aware that the documents are available online. So please choose one of the options so we can see a little bit, what your state of knowledge on the Social Summit is. And then you hit the submit button and we can see the responses from our group. So we give it a couple of seconds of time for you to choose the answer, and then we see what results we get. And please, in the meantime, feel free to present yourself in the chat. So 100% of persons have answered, and here are the results. 43% have read the latest version of the political declaration, 11% have read an earlier version, 40% have not read any draft, and 15% were not aware that the documents are available. So I think we have a really interesting split of the group. 50% are pretty much informed on the status of the political negotiations, and 50%, are really here to learn more about what is going on and, where do we stand in terms of the preparations of the Social Summit. So then let's move on to the agenda of today. As said, we will start with a little bit of background on the USP 2030, and also where we stand in terms of the negotiations of the political declaration. Then we will move on to a panel, expert inputs around 20 minutes, and then we open for discussion. So let me give you a little bit of background on where we stand in the preparation and the run-up to the Social Summit and what role this global partnership USP 2030 is playing. So you might have seen a joint statement that was published by the partnership, which really tries to coordinate the efforts to promote universal social protection at the Social Summit happening in Doha. And what is also very important in this joint statement by USP 2030, that it directly builds on the Sevilla commitment, the outcome document of the 4th Finance for Development Conference that happened in July in Sevilla, and where member states and participants at the conference already committed to the goal of increasing coverage of social protection by 2 percentage points per year. So USP 2030 has taken up this demand that was put forward and endorsed by member states in Sevilla to also be confirmed at the Social Summit in Doha. However, we also want to go a little bit further than that and be more concrete, on what is expected from member states in the area of social protection. So the USP 2030 statement also emphasized that it is important to strengthen benefit adequacy and the sound planning process to achieve this target, and also obviously to have very concrete financing strategies to put the coverage extension into practice. A second important information that I would like to convey to you is that USP 2030 and the socialprotection.org platform has also launched a campaign in the run-up to the Social Summit, which includes podcasts, blog posts, this webinar, and where we try really to get everyone on board and informed, but also to create an advocacy community for this goal to be very prominent in Doha. Now, when we look at the draft declaration, which some of you have read, and others are now eager to learn about where we stand there, we can see that the draft declaration is basically the outcome document that has been negotiated over the last couple of weeks and months between member states, and which will be the political commitment that governments sign up to at the summit in Doha in November. And this is already the second revision of the document. It really has also received inputs from civil society, from the UN, and from other stakeholders. And in this draft that was now released mid-July, and which is again, was afterwards negotiated, but we don't have the third revision yet. So in this draft, we see that social protection is highlighted very clearly and appears across the document. I don't know how much, those who are in this call know about, how basically the social development agenda in Copenhagen, and now also for the second summit, is framed. It rests on 3 pillars: poverty reduction, access to decent work and productive employment, and social integration. And we see that social protection is considered an essential tool in all of these 3 areas. So, when we look at the different sections, we see that in the political declaration, in the section on poverty and inequality, sustainable and equitable financing of social protection comes up. The goal of the 2% coverage extensions is there. Social protection floors are mentioned. Integrated package of services and benefits for children are also explicitly mentioned. In the section on full and productive employment and decent work, the Global Accelerator and the Global Coalition for Social Justice are mentioned. For those of you who are not aware of these are 2 key initiatives led by the ILO with a broad set of partners, and the Global Accelerator also with the participation of the World Bank. So these key initiatives are mentioned. USP, universal social protection, is also mentioned as an enabler of sustainable and inclusive growth, and as relevant to secure, livelihoods and income security across the life course, and for caregivers. So also very important, that the aspect of care systems and the relationship with social protection is explicitly mentioned. Then in the section on social integration, social protection comes up as an instrument to reduce inequalities, to address the demographic trends we are witnessing, especially aging societies, and also in terms of, catering for persons with disabilities. And then we have cross-cutting issues in the political declaration, where again, social protection features quite prominently. Adaptive social protection is mentioned in the sections on disaster risk reduction. In general, universal social protection is deemed a crucial instrument for gender equality and the redistribution of care responsibilities. And, it also comes up in the paragraphs that directly relate to financing for social development, which also has very clear links to the Sevilla commitment document. So next slide, please. So that said, let's move to our second poll and hear your opinions on the following question. Is social protection adequately featured in the draft declaration? And is the declaration overall a strong document if it is adopted in its current form? So please answer the poll that will appear on your screen. So again, 4 possible answers. Yes, the passing of the current draft would be an important and strong step to achieve better social development outcomes. The draft is good, but key elements are missing. Third, the document lacks ambition, or the document is actually a step back compared to other documents adopted recently. So please make your choice and let's see what the opinion is in the room. A couple of people still haven't voted, but I can also assume that those who haven't read the latest draft or recent draft of the political declaration might feel, that they cannot answer this question. Really, I just gave a very quick overview, of course, where social protection features in the political declaration. But yeah, don't feel pressured if you think, I haven't read the document, I can't answer this question. So we close in a couple of seconds. So now we have the answers on the screen. So the 38% actually think, if we could pass this current draft, it would be an important and strong step forward. 40%, so a little bit more, think, yes, it's good, but some elements are missing. And I think this is the exciting answer also, because we want to find out in this town hall webinar also what is actually missing. And even 20% feel that the document lacks ambition. Again, we are very curious to hear, where you think the document lacks ambition and how this could maybe changed. And even 3% think that the document could be considered a step back compared to other documents adopted recently. And of course, a lot of people who follow these processes very closely also compare, this document to the original Copenhagen Declaration that was adopted in 1995, which was a very long and quite progressive document. So the bar is high, I would say, for governments now gathering in Doha to reach a similar, impactful outcome document. So let's move to the last slide in this opening part of the webinar. We are already a little bit over time, but I do not want to miss out on informing you that USP 2030 and all the members that are part of this partnership also are very busy in organizing solution session for the summit. And what we try to do in this group is actually to join forces and, to have a series of events or to bring in our joint statement and the call for universal social protection in different side events that are directly or speaking to social protection or to some of the cross-cutting issues that are also in the political declaration. So you will see that the social summit will have an official program, and we will hear more about this from our cherished colleague from DESA in a minute. But there is also space throughout the 3 days for solution session. And so the partnership USP 2030 is engaged or directly leading side events on the following topics. You see, it touches upon universal social protection for equitable growth and equitable societies, universal social protection for better health and improved resilience and poverty reduction. One is focusing on decent jobs, digital transformation, the aging question, financial resource mobilization for social protection and health, the gender equality perspective, the looking at youth and how we can shape inclusive social protection and decent work for young people. Disability is the focus of one of the side events, resilience and risk reduction. And again, there is another event on financing and implementation for justice and resilience. So please keep in mind, that we have all these different side events. And if you're in Doha, please make sure that you can attend as many as possible, of these side events. I was actually asked to also provide some insights on the preparatory activities that UNRWA has led in the run-up to the summit. But in the interest of time, I would just like to let you know that we have conducted a couple of regional consultations and a global survey on what people think and experts think are key social development challenges in our current times. And I will just, paste the links to the briefs that summarize the outcomes of these events and consultations in the chat, so you can take a look at that. But, now I'm very happy to introduce our panelists who will start us off with some, kickoff insights into where are we coming from and where are we going to. So point of departure, high time of globalization in 1995, a very progressive Copenhagen Declaration. And now 30 years further down the line, in a very challenging context for multilateralism, for democracy, for sustainable development, and for international solidarity, we have now the chance to meet in Doha and to put social development at the center of our ambition and of our joint efforts. And I would like to start with our first invited expert, Odile Frank, who is the former chief of social integration division for social policy and development at UN DESA, and was very engaged in, the follow-up implementation processes after Copenhagen. So I wanted to ask you, Odile, could you give us a little bit of a contextualization of the second summit with this broader historical perspective in mind? Telling us how has social protection evolved within the social development agenda since the Copenhagen Declaration? Over to you. You have to unmute yourself, I think.
Yes, thank you, Katja. Yes, with pleasure. I'm going to simplify, and I'm going to go over a lot of territory in a short time, but I think it's important as background for the Second World Summit. I'm starting with the Second World War. After the Second World War, there were several decades of what we would call social liberalism that dominated the scene. In the North, there was the welfare state, and in the South, there was an increasing enjoyment of decolonization, and also extraordinarily strong programs of investment and of assistance from the North to the South for development. And there was the creation of many structures that we know today that provided development assistance at that time. This string of liberalism was broken in the 1980s by the sharp rise in economic liberalism. And the tension between social liberalism and economic liberalism has basically dominated geopolitical interests since that time, with swings to one side or another at different points. The United Nations has largely been on the social liberalism side, largely. Not always, but largely. And it is in this context that both the Rio Conference of 1992 and the World Summit for Social Development of 1995 took place. Both of them were very much in the context of a social liberalism countercurrent to the increasing role of economic liberalism. However, by the end of the century, by the end of the 20th century, it was again a period of swinging. The first follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development, which took place just 4 years later, already produced a very perfunctory report. It was not at all wide-ranging or visionary as Copenhagen had been. But within a year after that, the Secretary General's report on social protection which is a remarkable document. I recommend it to everybody. This document came out in 2000, struggling to find a definition of what social development could be in the social protection context. Truly struggling. But then there was a swing, and the Millennium Declaration and the Millennium Development Goals again veered towards economic liberalism. Poverty reduction was kept, it was maintained, but the rest of social development disappeared into a series of silo approaches to social development. And at this point, what became remarkable is the involvement of the private sector and private sector money, foundations, etc., in the area of health, for example. I'm citing in particular the rise of the control of HIV, AIDS, and malaria, and also the large vaccination programs, which basically occupied the major space with respect to health for the next 2 decades. So I arrived in 2001 in DESA. On top of all this, I was hired by John Langmore and discovered quite quickly that there was no normative agenda for social development. There was no agenda at the UN, which basically followed on directly from the ambitious program of Copenhagen. Social integration was created. Now it's called social inclusion, but it was atomistic and siloistic. We had everything. We had concerns for special groups, and this still is the predominant approach today, though there were some extraordinary achievements. I note in particular, we launched in 2001 the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, which was produced in a record time, 5 years. It came out in 2006, was adopted in 2006, largely thanks to civil society. The civil society engagement in that convention was absolutely remarkable. So here I am in 2001, and there are 2 major things taking on. One is a long-term context, and the other is a very short-term context. The long-term context is the acceleration of globalization. By 2001, 2002, we were aware that this was taking over very largely, and it was stimulated, obviously, by economic liberalism. But what happened is that the benefits of globalization also became evident. That is, that claims could be made that it was economic globalization which benefited the poverty reduction, in massive poverty reduction, particularly in China, but also in Brazil. Despite the Bolsa Familia, it was put on the count of globalization that this poverty reduction was taking place, and not on the Millennium Development Goals themselves. So here we are, and then there was something which had a remarkable impact, and that was 9/11, and it had a remarkable impact on New York, on the UN, on all of us who were employed there personally, but it also had an impact on the ability of the UN to maintain its socially liberal agenda, because here was there was a rise in xenophobia, nationalism, and, as you know, a series of wars and conflicts which really divided the world in ways that were the worst since the Second World War. At that point, I had a discussion with Nitin Desai. Nitin Desai is a remarkable person. He was the Undersecretary General at the time, responsible for organizing both Rio in 1992 and the World Summit for Social Development in 1995. And I went to him to talk about the possibility of a normative agenda for social development within the UN system at DESA. And he basically told me that there was no appetite and no ambition at the time among the member states for a normative social development agenda. He said that I should consider that the role of social integration and of social development was essentially to compensate for the unintended negative consequences of globalization, because we saw those rising just as we saw the benefits rising, and to deal with the collateral damage of globalization and economic growth. So basically, thank you. Thank you.
Odile.
I want to say that that's where we stood in 2002. Now, it took until 2012 for the vision of a normative agenda in social development to take form, and that is due to recommendation 202 of the ILO. This recommendation not only had an excellent theoretical basis, it was rights-based theory, but it also had a very clear series of actions that could be taken. That recommendation came out critically 3 years before the SDGs, and it was swept up into the SDGs and became SDG 1 Target 3, the first concrete measure proposed in the Sustainable Development Goals for putting an end to poverty. I would say that universal social protection is the single greatest addition that there has been to the agenda for social development since Copenhagen. And it's the only contribution. It is the only measurable, identifiable element that has changed social development since Copenhagen. In 2000, the Secretary General's report said, and I'm quoting this, "The existence of social protection can be recognized as one of the great social achievements of the 20th century." This is in 2000. Now in 2025, I would argue that universal social protection will be seen as the single greatest social achievement of the 21st century. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Odile, for giving us these historical insights and taking us through the journey, from 95 to today, and how important actually social protection has become, as an indicator really that tells us about, how inclusive and how equitable a society is, and also, how much it cares about human rights, the human right to social protection, but also how much it cares about resilient and, how to say it, societies that are actually prepared to respond to crises and shocks, because, we are living in an era of multiple and overlapping crises. So thank you very much for giving us that perspective. And I would like to lead over to another colleague, current colleague from DESA, from the Division for Economic and Social Affairs in New York, Masumi Ono. We are very pleased to have you. Masumi is the Chief of the Social Inclusion and Participation Branch at UN DESA, and she's also very much involved in the preparations and in the engagement process of the summit. So Masumi, could you give us an overview, of the summit, its objectives, and the opportunities for engagement? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katja, for the kind introduction and for this opportunity to brief all of you. I hope to give you some sense of how the issues you care about have made their way into the summit preparations. I'll also touch upon the engagement opportunities at the summit itself. Next slide, please. So the summit will take place from 4 to 6 November at the Qatar National Convention Center in Doha. Next slide. Why are we having a social summit? So as Odile had elaborated and situated the summit, it's high time that we take stock of progress and remaining gaps in the implementation of the Copenhagen Declaration and the Program of Action. As you heard from Odile, a lot has happened in the last 30 years, and therefore policy actions need to be aligned to meet new and emerging challenges, and those include climate change, migration, demographic shifts, and digitalization. With everything that is going on today, more than ever, we need to mobilize concrete actions for addressing unresolved social challenges to strengthen resilience for broad, just, and sustained social progress. And an issue that is, I'm sure, very dear to this group, we need to strengthen political will and public support for social policy and social spending as an investment in people and societies. And last but not least, we need to build international cooperation and coordination around social perspectives of development by governments, the multilateral system, and the stakeholders. Next slide, please. As many of you know and have been heavily engaged, the social protection issues highlighted during the negotiations are gaps in social protection coverage, contribution of social protection to poverty eradication, decent work, social integration, reducing inequality, disaster risk reduction, and gender equality, and increasing investments in social protection systems. Next slide, please. There have been numerous consultations in the lead up to the summit at global, regional, and national levels. Katja mentioned the global survey by UNRIST. There were also Commission for Social Development that held a Civil Society Forum, ECOSOC Youth Forum, ECOSOC High Level Political Forum. All these existing mechanisms have used that opportunity to have consultations. Co-facilitators of the political declaration have held hearings with stakeholders at critical points in the process. The president of ECOSOC has also hosted briefings for the major groups of stakeholders. At the regional level, regional commissions have held on the margins of their Regional Sustainable Development Forum some consultations, as well as for some regional commissions, they've used their Standing Committee on Social Development. At the national level, we've encouraged consultations through our resident coordinator system, and many UN entities have held thematic consultations on the subjects that they have mandates and expertise. All of this is on a searchable database on our summit website. Right now, we are running a outreach campaign, which is a global survey asking what does social progress mean to you? Next slide, please. So the engagement opportunities at the summit in itself include attending official sessions, attending special events, organizing or joining side events, which we call solution sessions, hosting an exhibit at the Solution Square, networking and mobilizing action, as this is very much an in-person event, and also to participate at regional and national levels where there are still ongoing consultations and events. Next slide, please. The official program of the summit consists of an opening, 2 high-level roundtables, plenary meetings, and a closing segment. This summit is considered a GA plenary. Next slide, please. The parallel program consists of the social solution sessions, Solution Square, and this is special events that was mentioned earlier, including Civil Society Forum, a private sector forum, the Hunger Alliance special high-level event, and a social policy impact forum. Next slide, please. Some key dates before I close. The registration is open now until 30th September. All participants must be registered and they must come from an accredited organization. Side event applications and exhibit applications will close on 31st August, so there's still a few more days. And please do check the official website for more updates in the coming days and weeks. Final slide. Thank you so much. Here's the website in case you have not checked it out yet. There's a FAQ, briefing kit, and applications, and many useful information. The registration portal is through Indigo. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Masumi, for giving us this overview and also explaining very much in detail all the different engagement mechanisms that are out there still for the coming months, and of course on site for those who will travel to Doha, and also for briefing everyone on all the consultations that have already happened. You know, this said, of course, it is a member state negotiation, you know, which is always a bit difficult for even the UN, but also for civil society to get a foot into the door, like we sometimes say. But that said, there is also a resource page on the DESA website, you know, where you can find briefs that were drafted by the UN agency's task force for the social summit, a lot of briefs also from the ILO and other organizations. So I very much encourage you to visit that. And all of these documents, the evidence, you know, has informed and is informing the political negotiations that are happening. And we can also get some firsthand, you know, insights from that from other panelists we will hear today. I would now like to move to our third distinguished speaker, Mr. Peter Ombassa from Kenya. He is Assistant Director at the National Social Protection Secretariat, and we are very pleased to also hear your insights on the upcoming Social Summit, and in particular, you know, what you see as a country that is also very, very engaged in the promotion of universal social protection. How do you see the opportunities created by the summit to further make the case for greater investments in comprehensive social protection systems? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are. I just want to compliment my colleagues who just talked just ahead of me, and I want to thank especially Odile for that particular discussion of where we have come from, and of course Masumi for what we've done. Basically, I come from the Global South. I have to state that early in advance so that colleagues on this particular webinar can be aware. In the Global South, we have a different challenge other than the challenge that is known. We have a bulging youth population that is very educated, but lacking jobs. That is a big challenge. We don't have an aging population as other countries, but the social protection sphere that we are having is basically not universal as of now. But that does not mean that we don't have a lot of social protection interventions that have been done in many of our countries. The World Social Protection Summit that is coming up, which is the second one since the Copenhagen in 1995, has a very specific significance, especially to Kenya, because we've more often than not tried to increase our expenditure and funding and financing towards social protection over many years. We might not have reached that particular scenario that we want, but traditionally, and we've increased quite significantly over time. And we want to basically agree that for us to be able to serve our population well, there's need for us to have a very robust way of increasing funding towards social protection, especially to meet and to mitigate on the issues that we have as countries in the Global South. It's good to basically realize that the social protection interventions in Africa, especially in Kenya, have taken quite historical times, and we've many a times tried to make sure that we we meet the best at any particular time. But it's good to say, do we have any efforts towards making sure that we have a global, we have social protection, especially increased over time? The answer is yes. But why do we have these advantages? One, I want to state very clearly that for us in the Global South, we see social protection as a way of poverty reduction. And of course, making sure that inequality is reduced over time. Secondly, there's what we call improved healthcare. Many a times in our Global South, healthcare is a challenge, and especially the other part of availability. Thirdly, economic stability, and fourthly, human capital development is very important for social protection in most of our country. And finally, the social contract. It's quite critical for us when you have a very good system of social protection. The citizens feel more happy. They feel a sense of belonging to that particular country. And that is why we want to be we want to increase our social protection financing and funding. Why are we members in the USB 2030? That should be very clear. We realize that as a country, we've not been able to do quite well, especially in increasing funding. Therefore, the advocacy campaign that we joined is for the benefit of making sure that we are, together with other colleagues in Africa and the world at large, we are able to advocate for governments to increase their funding so that more persons, more innovations, more interventions can reach the very poor in society. Therefore, our entry into the USB 2030 is very critical in terms of showcasing what is critical in Africa. As the second World Social Summit is coming, what is this that we want to tell the world? We intend to tell the world that, look, in as much as we're in the Global South, there is certain progress that we've made, despite the small income or the small GDP that we have. We've made tremendous changes, we've made tremendous strides towards making sure that at least we increase funding. Right now in Kenya, we are talking about close to about 3% of the GDP going towards social protection. But is that where we want to be? The answer is no. As we continuously advocate for increased funding, we communicate with governments and make sure that these governments that we are in are able to effectively spare some more funding towards social protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. You mentioned very important points and something that we also endorse and can actually underpin with the research that we have conducted over decades. And that is the fact that social protection is crucial for growth and economic development, for inclusive development. You mentioned, human capital, you mentioned economic stability, you mentioned also, the big objective to get young people, into decent work, into qualified jobs. And all of this is supported by social protection and by social policies. So, we are very grateful for your strong message that for African countries, an increased investment in social protection is really crucial. Thank you very much for sharing the message and the Kenyan experience. And I would now like to move to Ann-Kathrin Beck from the German Ministry for Development Cooperation. And we are very curious to hear, Ann-Kathrin, what you see as the emerging challenges for social protection, that have been discussed in the German context and beyond, in the lead up to the Social Summit. And, what are the key challenges that you would identify which, should be addressed during the summit? And also, how can we harness more international support, for the commitments that we expect from the summit in order to really make a difference for social development outcomes? Over to you, Ann-Kathrin.
Yeah, thanks so much, Katja, for setting the scene and bringing up the issue of challenges, because I feel we have already listened to quite a lot of information that really gives us an understanding of where we're coming from, what is the historic context of this. So thank you very much, Odile, for that, but also how the event itself will look like. And in the case of Peter, it was really interesting to hear again about the multiplier effects that social protection can have and how things have developed in a country like Kenya, which is certainly a unique case, but not the only case, where we have seen great advances, but where we also continue to see challenges. I would like to add to that in terms of challenges that, of course, the world 2025 is not the same that it was in 95, but it's also not the same that we had just 5 years ago. So especially this year, we have seen a situation of scarce financial resources. There's a decline of international support and also growing geopolitical tensions that really have made further advances on social protection difficult, but also particularly negotiations at global fora. I believe I have already seen it in the chat that we have seen advances in the G20 call to action. We have anchored very specific, very detailed language on the G20 declaration on social protection and social protection floors. So that is a great win. But we have also seen how difficult it was to negotiate the Pact for the Future, or how difficult it was to negotiate at the Financing for Development Summit earlier this year. So I think that really helps us to understand a little bit what situation are we in, and also helps us a little bit with the expectation management. Because I'm probably one of the people who wrote in the poll earlier that we could do a little more on the political declaration, and we're quite excited to see the third version of that, to see how it's come out. Because we do feel that the political declaration references social protection in quite a few places. Katja, you already elaborated on that. But we were as Germany as a country, but then also Germany within the European Union and with our partners like USP 2030 and all who comprise it, we were really pushing for social protection to be a key element at the summit itself and at the accompanying events. And having it as one of the explicit cross-cutting issues would also have allowed us to look a little bit deeper into different components of, or like different key topics that are really emerging around social protection. And this is where I'm getting to this more content-heavy part. Katja, you already mentioned it, how social protection is referenced as like quite important in terms of adaptive social protection. As you know, Germany has been a long advocate for this, to really set up systems that are shock responsive, that are adaptive to emerging situations, to climatic, economic, social shocks that may occur in a country. And we feel this is referenced in the current political declaration to some extent. But of course, we're quite excited to work with international partners on this going forward. And a second topic that also relates to the first one is definitely fragility, because we have seen a rise of fragility over the past years. And evidence really shows us that social protection can play a key role, because it may also serve as a critical bridge between humanitarian responses and long-term development cooperation. And Germany has been working on this more specifically in the Sahel region, where we really have like hedged on that critical link of like going in with short-term interventions that may be cash transfers, but linking them to national systems to allow for long-term development. And there is momentum for that topic right now, but there's also a need for that topic right now, as we see crisis like spiraling out of hand a little more, and we see many conflict-affected countries and regions. So especially given this current geopolitical context, such an integrated approach should be clearly promoted at the summit and beyond. Yeah, and the last one I would like to highlight is climate change. This has also been mentioned before, because climate change, both in terms of mitigation and adaptation, really poses challenges for social protection, how we're supporting our own people. But social protection also is an instrument that we can use more proactively, again, through adaptive social protection systems and initiatives, but also when we bring social protection and all the climate discussions that are going on right now into the discussions about resilience and about just transition. Because it is quite an essential tool to help individuals and communities prepare for climate shocks, they may recover quickly and adapt better to long-term climate impacts. So therefore, or like as an additional data point, we see that more than 90% of people living in the 20 countries most affected by climate crises lack access to any form of social protection. So this is really quite stark. We feel that is somewhere in the discussion already on the WSSD, but we definitely need to promote this topic more, and we need to like build these international alliances and partnerships to understand how we can harness climate finance to reach people through social protection. So this is really a significant opportunity. There is a task force on this, which we are also co-hosting. There is already this whole movement to bring different actors together, but it's definitely something we need to look more into for the Social Development Summit. So we are really quite interested to be here today and to support USP 2030 as a member, but also as speakers, because we do believe that platforms like this, where we bring stakeholders together from different countries, different communities, different organizations, are very much needed to get an understanding of what is possible. And to also get an understanding of the fact that there is our ambition and our ideal scenario, but also what we can ideally achieve, like realistically achieve in the declaration and in the summit itself. So we definitely need to walk that fine line. And it has been mentioned before, we have managed to anchor the 2% goal in the T20 declaration, which really is not an obligation, but an invitation to countries to prioritize social protection for their people, because it has all these multiplier effects, such as the ones Peter has just told us about. So we hope that this will be pushed forward a lot more in the declaration and at the summit. And we would also like to highlight that it is a lot about the declaration, but also about everything that happens around. And this is where we come to the initial international support. So Katja, you have already shown us all the side events and solution sessions that will be happening around the summit itself, but it's also the conversations that we're leading here now, how we're talking within our countries. Because in many countries, if you look at our governments, it's actually not the ministries or the planning committees for development that are involved in the summit. It is the ministries for labor and social protection. So this also like leads us to take this as an opportunity to really interact across government with all ministries that are involved in social protection. And then further, it also helps to like look at all the other processes that are going on this year. We already have looked at G20, FFD4, but also COP30 coming up to really connect the links. So we've been trying that as German government, and I know many of our counterparts in like countries have done that, and we're very thankful also to civil society organizations and NGOs who have been relentless in showing up these interconnections that we maybe sometimes lose track of. So to close this, just let me say that the ambitious goal of universal social protection will require our collective action and a strong commitment to alliances and innovative financing mechanisms. And we hope for them to be reflected at the summit. And we, as the largest bilateral donor in the field of social protection, have already initiated multilateral alliances that are key for this. But we're really looking forward to work with all of you together to advance this at the summit and beyond.
Thank you so much, Ann-Kathrin, for this very comprehensive and also substantive discussion, of which challenges, could benefit from a stronger emphasis in the political declaration, but also how we have to work together, in multi-stakeholder alliances, before, during, and also after the summit, to make this, goal of achieving universal social protection a reality, really, in difficult times, as you have also emphasized. And I think especially the reference to, the integrated approach is something that resonates strongly with me. and where we also think that, more could be done in the political declaration, but also, I mean, if we don't achieve this goal, it's still something that we have to emphasize after the summit, when we are going into a new round of implementing actually commitments, that we have integrated approaches that look at, the humanitarian development peace nexus, that look at the eco-social and just transition, issues. So social protection, needs to be integrated with economic policies, with environmental policies, but also, with what's happening in the humanitarian sector. So many thanks for this. I also have to alert our audience that Ann-Kathrin has to leave pretty soon. So this is why we also gave her a little bit more time, to explain. So she might not be there for answering questions, but I'm sure that this was already very informative for our audience. So thanks to you very much, Ann-Kathrin, when you have to leave pretty soon, for joining us today. And I would like to move to our last speaker, last but not least. We are very happy to have Anjela Taneja from OXFAM here. Anjela is not only a strong member of the civil society community, that really coordinates and collaborates in the preparation of the summit. She is leading the work on public services and inequality in OXFAM. And Anjela, for you, I have the question of, just getting your views also on the current status of the political declaration, what you think about it, what might be missing, is it ambitious enough? What is the civil society stance towards, from your Oxfam perspective? And also, how do you see the role of civil society in realizing progress towards the achievement of universal social protection?
So I seem to have structured my input in bunches of three. Uh, what is positive about the declaration? To me, there are three things. It's good in terms of building on existing frameworks. It has evolved, particularly in terms of each revision of the draft becoming more like what one would expect. Uh, we've had a reaffirmation of the SDGs, and in this current difficult political climate, one has to be happy with surprisingly things that we used to take for granted a year back. As Oxfam, we're particularly happy that it does recognize inequality as problematic. Thirdly, in terms of social protection, the language has really improved and been strengthened over time. And to me, that's among the brightest spots in the declaration in terms of moving the needle forward on the social protection agenda. Having said so, uh, three things that in terms of the process and in terms of the overarching framing, that could have been strengthened. And I must confess, I was one of those who felt that that it's not ambitious enough. Uh, Firstly, it lacks concrete recommendations, actionable recommendations, indicators, monitoring frameworks. The Copenhagen Declaration 30 years back set a pretty high benchmark in terms of what one can expect a social summit to achieve, not least given the fact that it's happening after 30 years, as we keep being reminded. So therefore, that sense of new direction setting and concrete actions that will be taken as a result of this declaration is something that I miss. Secondly, and related to the legacy of Copenhagen, I do feel that it has been focused a bit too much on the legacy of Copenhagen. And some of the conversations around the fact that social issues have actually significantly changed in the last 30 years, and many more newly challenges have arisen in the last 30 years, which sometimes get lost when you frame your conversations around the framework that was agreed in Copenhagen. Thirdly, a lot of consultations, a lot of discussions have happened with member states and with the UN system. And I can't help feeling that somewhere along the way, civil society got slightly forgotten. Uh, this, especially as we're seeing, this is the next big summit after FFD. And we miss the fact that we miss some form of framework for a civil society mechanism like we had for FFD in terms of ensuring civil society voice in the negotiations in a meaningful, structured, organized way, and which people who were in Copenhagen seem to recall being one of its key features. So therefore, now that we are entering, and the way the ACS, the framework, the document appears to recommend that the agenda would be revisited every 5 to 10 years, depending on how the negotiation shapes up. That to me is something that will have to be worked upon, other in order for this to the social summit, especially its revisiting, to have the impact that we need. Third, lastly, three things on specifically on content. Uh, uh, Not enough on this normative social development agenda that one was the legacy of Copenhagen, and I myself return to the legacy of Copenhagen here. What I miss is the overarching framing on public services and a public role of the state to deliver to its people across the various specific sectors. Yes, there is decent language on the specific sectors, but the obligation of the state to ensure universal, inclusive, publicly delivered and funded quality services and ensure that services are free to its citizens is something that I'm missing. And that's the question of free provision and public provision is at the heart of the social protection agenda. Secondly, great that there is recognition of the fact that inequality is important. Again, I miss clear actions to address inequality. We would have wanted to see some language on ensuring that countries set global and national targets and develop national inequality reduction plans with clear targets to address income and wealth inequality, to have clearer commitments to disaggregated data and action on intersectional discrimination and inequality. Both of all of this is not that particularly well framed in the declaration. Lastly, in terms of content, we don't have enough framing on the risks associated with the financialization and privatization of key social services. Indeed, the fact that PPPs are being recommended as an option for healthcare to me is downright dangerous and regressive. So therefore, it uh, it is the rise of the private sector is one of the, and especially for profit private sector, has been one of the challenges that have arisen since Copenhagen and doesn't find reflection in the framing. What's the role of civil society? It is to raise the alarm when something is happening which is regressive. It is essential from a social protection lens. Civil society is essential to make social protection more inclusive, transparent, and responsive. We are, as civil society, are able to leverage advocacy skills, monitoring, some service delivery that civil society does, research and coalition building to bring about change, being both pushing the narrative as well as pushing governments towards greater action. It's the coalition building role that's also particularly important at moments like this. So therefore, again, from a civil society lens and social protection, as I started in the beginning, it's the strengthened language on social protection is one of the bright spots of the declaration, which could not have happened without the USP 2030 community as well as civil society coalitions like the Global Coalition on Social Protection Floors and the Campaign on Social Security. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Anjela, for this very clear and constructive perspective from OXFAM and from a broader civil society perspective. So we are slightly behind time. We would have liked to have more time for discussion. So I won't hesitate a minute more to open the floor to your comments and questions. And I would suggest that you raise your hand. And I have seen that there are a lot of questions also in the chat, but you know, it would be quicker if you could raise your hand and very quickly post the question in speaking. So I will start with Evelyn from IFSW. Evelyn, please, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate this presentation, this opportunity. I'll get right to my question. I want to begin by saying, I'm going to read over here, that recognizing the strong language and framing that challenges states to work grounded in anti-racism, promoting diversity and cultural respect and equity, and the framing of social justice. Really excited to see that language, really critically important. I'm going to go to the after the meeting, since many of us will not be able to be participating, and looking at the commitment to multi-stakeholder engagement and partnerships, how civil society, workers groups, unions, youth, faith-based organizations, how might or do you see us being involved in this ongoing review, which I think is 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, I can't remember the numbers exactly. What can we hope for in terms of future engagement and input? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Evelyn. And who would like to come next? I would like to collect a couple of interventions, comments, plus questions from the floor before handing back to the panel. I don't know if it's my screen or if I cannot see the hands up. Please don't hesitate, those who have put questions in the chat, just to raise your hand and to repeat the question in speaking. Haruna, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this insightful deliberation by all the speakers. It was quite very educative, and thanks to the organizers. My question will be to have more of a comment, but also a question as well. I come from the Gambia, but currently in Germany, pursuing my master's in social protection. And in Gambia, I work at the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Welfare. And it's quite interesting to note the deliberation from Peter Obasa from Kenya, a country where my ministry and, of course, some of the stakeholders conducted a learning and sharing session to study their social protection intervention. In the Gambia, where government more or less spend 0.18 of national budget in social protection, meeting the global target in terms of universal social protection is always a challenge in the absence of donor funding. So I don't know how, I might not be in attendance for this global summit, but it is important for the global north to kind of extend social protection financing, especially in the global south, to kind of meet the universal target as ILO suggests in terms of meeting the 1.3 of the SDG, which is quite very important. So I don't know how the summit could also drive towards that in terms of boosting the social protection financing for least developing countries who are struggling to meet even the ILO social protection spending target, considering their budget challenges. Thank you very much. But overall, it was a very educative and interesting program.
Thank you very much, Haruna. And I would like to give the floor to Victor. Victor, can you hear me? You have your hand raised.
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you. Mine is just a very something for us to think about. While we want governments to sort of increase coverage, financing, and all of that, I would like to ask, what can we do to really get civil societies in developing countries to really, pick up on their engagement to government in terms of
Sorry, Victor,
advocacy and
we
all of
can't
that,
hear you
because
well.
the last
Sorry.
few years. All right, can you hear me very well now?
Yeah, now it's better. Could you please repeat?
Okay, so what I was trying to say is that how can we work with civil society to sort of increase their engagement and advocacy and third-party monitoring of government's provision of social protection as we seek to encourage governments to increase financing, increase coverage, and employ better targeting tools in a context where in the last few years, civil society have been really repressed. They have been really coerced, and they have really been sort of, kicked out of the physical and political space, such that it's a bit difficult for them to engage governments and build coalition. So is there a way that international partners can begin to look at a twin approach in supporting social protection expansion and coverage in developing countries by supporting the state and also supporting the civil society to build coalitions to work with the state? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Victor. The next on my list is Mondoa. Please take the floor.
Am I visible? I doubt. Can you get me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you see me, please? Oh, I see.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
perfect.
I am Paul Mundua. I work with the International Social Security Association. I'm based in Geneva, Switzerland. I just wanted to step in quickly following the last two interventions. The first, which came from our colleague from the Gambia, who is presently in Germany, with respect to the need for the global north to assist the global south. For sure, it's true. But one thing I want us to look at is that social security is all about solidarity, but not charity. Solidarity in the sense that we need to get all players involved in terms of financing, in terms of administrative support and other measures. But it should not be considered an element of charity, because if it's looked at charity, then I am scared we might find ourselves in a situation whereby we would expect other countries to finance social security in other countries through a sort of transfers of such programs. And that would not have that element of the national ownership of social protection programs. And there it comes with a risk, a political risk, because by the time you have a foreign country financing everything, there is a risk of interference in domestic affairs. And when countries want to just jealously protect their sovereignty, I think they have to equally pick on the responsibilities that comes with exercising sovereignty. And one of such responsibilities is social protection, which would warrant that countries look into measures to expand fiscal space, extend coverage. And one thing I usually tell people is that if countries can get into military spending, to engage in conflicts, then I think it's a just matter of choice. They have a possibility to engage in projects and programs that would support social protection. And one other element, I think the ILO has a couple of evidence on a lot of evidence on that, which looks at the feasibility of extending social security in developing countries. I think when we get through that catalog, there's a couple of examples we can pick from there, which will talk into fighting corruption, illicit financial flows, extending coverage, and many other. They were published in the 2015 World Social Protection Report. So I think we should look more into how to capitalize on domestic resource mobilization, minimizing the risk of financial losses such that they can be channeled into social protection. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this comment also, and for emphasizing domestic resource mobilization. Very important, and ILO, UNRWA, many actors have done a lot of work on this as well. Tobias, please, I have you on my list.
Yes, thank you very much for giving me the floor. Thank you very much for all the great presentations we had this afternoon. To my question, the first is, and I start from below, I sent them in the chat. How do you think to bridge the gap between the political and the economic world to gain acceptance for signing declarations and to become measures on the ground? And the other thing is, the other issue is I want to remember is that there is Esther Duflo. She's a French woman. She got the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2019 for doing some evidence-based practice in India for paying parents to send their children to school. And so she showed measures to eradicate poverty, not only on a short term, but on a long term. So everything starts with education from the first day on. And there is a big gap of financing and funding for. As in many countries around the world, children only go 6 years to school, and that is not enough for have decent work and being qualified and have a good training. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tobias, for mentioning education. I think that's also something that caught my attention when reading the current draft of the political declaration, that it lacks ambition there, because it talks about universal education, free education for all, at the very minimum, at the elementary and primary, very basic level, and not talking about the entire system, from primary to tertiary education. In the interest of time, I would like to go back to the panelists and invite every panelist in reverse order, I would say, to just pick one question or one comment that sparked your interest. And please keep your response. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, to 1 minute. So Anjela, what has sparked your interest when listening to the questions and comments of the participants?
And that doesn't give me a lot of time to gather my thoughts. Of course, as someone who has worked for 20 years in education, that obviously, and being also the last one, I would be the last person to say this is not important. Everyone comes from somewhere. For me, it has been the education struggle. The overarching, I guess, and I don't have an answer because I have not had the time to gather my thoughts, but to me, it is the need for us to. A lot of questions have alluded to the question of shrinking aid, which isn't really shrinking, it's cratering at this point in time. There have been allusions to the space for multilateral action no longer being there. So therefore, in addition, I would say we've also, and I've been saying this, I've said this before in public services circles, we have, as civil society, not necessarily done enough in recent years for solidarity across sectors. each of us have been fighting our own lonely struggle in terms of social protection, fighting its own battle versus health having its own battle or education having its own battle. We need to come together because it probably the uh, external threats to social services have reached a point where we do need to start being more organized in our advocacy and our engagement. Secondly,
Anjela, I need to move to the next speaker
so
because I think you had a powerful message there, and we want to stick to the 1 minute. Is that okay?
sure.
Thank you very much. So Peter, please your response or final comment.
Thank you so much. And I think most of the questions were focused on me, but allow me for the 1 minute only to talk about generally how can we increase the financing. Two things very critical. Number one, the political will of the ruling class. Very critical. Anybody, any social protection practitioner must be able, in one way or another, align himself or herself to the ruling class so that all your advocacy campaigns and communication strategies align to the political class. The second part of it is laws and regulations towards the state. In Kenya, we've definitely made sure that we have a law of social protection that makes certain aspects of social protection almost like a must. So if you have good laws, then whichever the regime that comes, they will still stick to the law unless they change the law with that regime. But then you already have the political will with you. This answers all the questions, including Tobias, the bridge of politics and economics, and of course, Modoa, who talks about the issue of making sure that the external funding does it also come in. And of course, my friend Arun from the Gambia, who says that financing social protection is a challenge in Africa. Yes, it can be challenging, but if you have laws and regulations that cater for social protection, then you are good to go. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Peter. Your comment reminds me of the social contract, bringing in the ruling class into the social contract as well and having very clear rights and obligations set out. Masumi, please, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the very important and interesting points made in the discussions and by all the panelists. I want to just say that I fully agree with Anjela and Odile and others who have mentioned the need to not work in silos, and this applies to governments, but also obviously to UN system. We are very guilty of that. And also on the point about the role of civil society in the follow-up, even although the political declaration is still to agree on these paragraphs, just to note that civil society plays an important role in mobilizing action, holding governments accountable, contributing practical solutions and bringing real world experience, and very importantly, to ensure diverse representation from developing countries, as well as those voices that are often underrepresented, persons with disabilities, youth, older persons, indigenous peoples, migrants, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
the last response by Odile, please.
Thank you very much. I join all the other speakers in saying that this is a wonderful set of questions. I sense that there's a tremendous amount of commitment and engagement. I think most of the questions had concerned civil society, what it could do, how it could organize itself. I have to say that if just listening to the amount of interest and knowing that half of you or half of the people who registered hadn't even read the document, I know that there is a tremendous capacity to increase the involvement of civil society. There's no question about it. What is difficult for civil society is, as Anjela pointed out, not to work in silos. We all have our special interest groups, we have our special pet projects, but we have to try and reach out and have more vision than one finds in the political declaration at this moment to bring the vision to it that it should have, and to work together to promote social development as a collective, really. That's incredibly important. One thing practical thing that can be done for civil society is to insist on a short reporting period in the declaration. Please note that we have the option to say that we do not want a 10-year interval, that we want a 5-year interval, if possible, an even shorter interval for reporting on progress towards the implementation of whatever outcomes the declaration comes out with. In order to get that declaration signed by the given the different political and economic interests, again, civil society can play a very important role at national level. It's to insist on accepting the declaration as it stands when it's finished. With regard to the issue of, I just have to say one last thing, because it's really interesting.
Please.
Tobias's comments about Duflo. What's been found, and I've seen this in UNRWA's papers as well, is what is the most important thing for people to have is the means to purchase the goods that they want. If they want education, they have to be able to purchase them. If they want to feed their children well, they have to be able to feed them. And when women are given income, they do these things. They purchase educational services and they purchase health services. This is why social protection guarantees are so important. And as Peter pointed out, they're fundamental to all of social and economic development. They're really, truly fundamental. I have to insist on that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Odile, for these final words. And I would say we would be happy if people wouldn't have to purchase really health or education and have actually access to free public quality services. And we will continue these discussions, and we have a side event in Doha. No, Odile, it's not that I interpret you in that way. It's completely understood.
That's not what I meant.
I know, because you
when your children don't have to work, when your children don't have to work to bring in income, they can go to school.
Exactly. No, and the point on income for women, very well taken and underpinned by research evidence. We are now at the coming to an end of this webinar. It was really a pleasure to hear your comments and questions and all the panelists. And I just would like to end, if you have a couple of more minutes to spare with us, please take place in this last interactive question. What should be the priority areas for attention and engagement for social protection, for the social summit? And if you click on that QR code, you will be able to input a couple of keywords there, of what you think, what should be the priority in terms of our, common engagement. And while you are, doing this, I just talk into your ears and hoping that you're a multitasker, and just, saying, please do also watch out for the community that was set up, on the socialprotection.org platform, where we gather all the information on the social summit, and also the DESA website, where you find all the important, deadlines and opportunities for engagement and resources, and of course the final revision of the political declaration will be also posted there very soon, and you can register for the summit. So please, continue to watch out for, the podcast series, and everything that USP 2030 and SP.org and all the partners involved are still, lining up and convening before the summit actually is happening. And here we see priority areas we should engage: financing social protection, climate change, care economy. We haven't talked about that. Mental health, strong track implementation. Exactly. I think we will have a very crucial role to play after the summit, and holding governments to account. Public services, decent work, locally led. Yeah. Transparency. Yeah. We haven't talked about governance, democratization, backlash. All of this will need to feature in discussions. It is in the declaration, but it could be stronger. Care economy, migration, So a lot of important keywords here, a lot of indications for action where we can join forces over the next couple of weeks. So thank you very much to everyone who has participated. A special applause to our panelists who have shared their experiences and information with us. This has been recorded. You can access the slides and the recording afterwards, and we hope to see you, at our next event. And thanks you so much for joining.